At 17, my own mother helped my stepfather call the police on me for a crime I didn't commit. I can still feel the humiliation of being questioned in my own living room, treated like a criminal. What they didn't realize was that they weren't creating a felon. They were forging the woman who would one day own their entire life. The award felt cold in my hands, heavier than I expected. It was for Young Entrepreneur of the Year, a recognition of the digital marketing agency I had built from nothing. The stage lights were hot, blurring the faces in the crowd into a sea of indistinct smiles. But I didn't need to see clearly. I knew exactly where he was. There, in the front row, was Vincent, my stepfather. He was beaming, clapping louder than anyone, turning to the people next to him with a proud, proprietary smile as if to say, "That's my girl." He looked every bit the supportive father, the respected Ohio history teacher and baseball coach everyone in our small town adored. He looked like the man who had raised me to be this successful. He was a phenomenal actor, but I had learned from the best. As the applause died down, I took a deep breath, my fingers tightening on the award. He thought this was his victory lap. He thought he was here to bask in the glow of the successful woman he'd molded. He had absolutely no idea that my entire acceptance speech was about to be dedicated to him. This wasn't just my story of success. It was the final chapter in one of those dark family revenge stories you only read about online. If you know what it feels like to stand in a moment of triumph that no one else understands the true, painful cost of, I see you. Let's make a map of silent strength tonight. Just type the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. He caught my eye and gave me a little wink. The show was about to begin. To understand the man smiling in that front row, you have to rewind 19 years. Back to a quiet, tree-lined street in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, where the biggest news was the high school football team's latest victory. I was 16. My mom, Helen, was a good woman, but she was adrift, lost in a quiet grief after my dad passed away 2 years prior. She was lonely, and her loneliness was an open door. And then, in walked Vincent. To everyone else, he was a godsend. He was the school's most charismatic history teacher, the celebrated coach of the varsity baseball team. He carried himself with an easy confidence, his laughter filling the spaces my dad's silence had left. He was chivalrous, attentive, and quickly became the man everyone, especially my mom, adored. He was the perfect picture of a second chance. But a picture can hide so much. From the moment he first shook my hand, my internal alarm bells were screaming. It wasn't anything I could prove. It was in the way his smile never quite reached his eyes. It was the possessive way his hand lingered on my mother's arm, a little too tight. It was a flicker of something cold and calculating when he thought no one was watching. While my mom saw a savior, I saw a predator meticulously studying his prey. It's a uniquely isolating feeling, being the only one who sees the cracks in a perfect facade. Let me know in the comments, have you ever had a gut feeling about someone that everyone else seemed to love? Just a simple yes or no. I want to know how many of us have felt that silent alarm. He moved in 2 months later, and that's when his masterpiece of deception truly began to take shape, starting with the slow, systematic dismantling of my world. His first target wasn't something he could physically throw away. It was something far more valuable. It was my world. Since I was 12, my sanctuary had been a glowing computer screen and a Wacom tablet. I spent thousands of hours teaching myself digital painting, 3D modeling, and animation. My hard drive wasn't just a collection of files, it was a universe of my own creation. It held the characters I'd designed, the short animations I'd painstakingly rendered frame by frame, the landscapes I'd painted when the gray Ohio suburbs felt too small for my dreams. It was my portfolio, my future, my voice. And he knew it. The trigger was laughably small. I had stayed up an hour past his newly instated 10 p.m. lights out rule to finish a piece for a school art competition. The next afternoon, I came home from school, dropped my backpack, and sat down at my desk, eager to add the finishing touches. I double-clicked the folder labeled Portfolio. It was empty. My stomach dropped. I clicked again. Nothing. I frantically searched the entire hard drive, the recycle bin, everywhere. It was all gone. Years of work vaporized. A cold dread washed over me as I realized this wasn't a glitch. I walked into the living room where he was watching television, my heart pounding. I asked him where my files were. He didn't even look away from the screen. "I cleared off some space for you," he said, his voice casual. "It's time you grew up, Olivia. You need to focus on real-world skills, not waste your life on that childish nonsense." It wasn't anger, it was erasure. He hadn't just deleted my art. He had deleted my identity with a single, dismissive click. When I tried to explain to my mom what he had done, the scale of the loss, the years of work he'd annihilated, she just didn't get it. And Vincent was right there, ready to translate my grief into his own twisted narrative. He'd put his arm around my mom, his voice dripping with false concern. "I'm worried about her, Helen," he'd say in a low, serious tone after I'd stormed off in tears. "She's so hysterical over a few computer files. This obsession isn't healthy. I think she needs more structure, more discipline." He was a master manipulator, framing his cruelty as concern. He wasn't the villain. I was the troubled teen, the difficult, dramatic daughter who was disrupting their newfound peace. And my mother, so desperate to believe in the perfect family he was selling her, bought every word. The gaslighting was constant and suffocating. My valid anger was labeled instability. My grief was melodrama. Soon, under his guidance, my world began to shrink. My internet access was restricted to 1 hour a night, for homework only, monitored over my shoulder. My closest friends were suddenly a bad influence, and sleepovers were out of the question. He was building a prison around me, brick by brick, and my own mother was handing him the mortar, believing she was building a fortress to keep me safe. There is a special kind of pain that comes from your own family siding with your tormentor. It's a silence that deafens you. I need to know if I was alone in this. Were you ever made to feel like you were the problem or too dramatic when you were just trying to speak your truth? If you've ever felt that, just write "I see you" in the comments. Let's make this a space where our truths are finally heard. I was trapped, and he was just getting started. After months of living in that suffocating silence, a tiny spark of defiance began to grow. I took on extra babysitting jobs in the neighborhood, hiding the cash I earned in a loose-leaf binder under my mattress. It took me nearly a year, but I finally saved up $400. Enough to buy a new, professional-grade graphics tablet. It wasn't just a replacement, it was a promise to myself that he hadn't won. I ordered it online and had it shipped to the house, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and hope as I clicked confirm purchase. But I never even got to open the box. Vincent found it on the porch first. He saw my small act of rebellion, not as a hobby, but as a declaration of war. That evening, he staged his masterpiece. He sat my mother down at the kitchen table, his face a mask of sorrow and disappointment. He told her he'd found the tablet and, after checking her credit card statements, discovered that I had stolen her card to buy it. He painted a picture of a troubled daughter spiraling out of control, a kleptomaniac who needed a real wake-up call. He convinced my mother that the only way to scare me straight and save me from a life of crime was to involve the authorities. An hour later, 2 police officers were standing in our living room. I was 17. They questioned me about credit card theft while my mother wept and Vincent stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder in a gesture of support. He had turned my one act of hope into the ultimate humiliation. He hadn't just called the cops on me. He had made my own mother an accomplice in the final, absolute betrayal. There was nothing left for me in that house. That night, something inside me finally broke. Or maybe it was finally forged into steel. After the officers left, leaving behind a house thick with the stench of betrayal, I waited until I heard the lock on Vincent's bedroom door click shut. I packed a single backpack with a change of clothes, my hidden stash of babysitting money, and the one photo I had left of my real dad. Then, I walked out the front door and never looked back. I didn't have a plan, just a destination, away. I walked for 2 hours to a 24-hour gas station and used a payphone, my hands shaking as I dialed the only number that represented a sliver of hope. My Aunt Megan. Megan was my mom's younger sister, a sharp, no-nonsense graphic designer who lived in Pittsburgh. She and my mom had a major falling out a year after Vincent moved in. Megan had seen right through his charming facade, calling him a textbook narcissist, a warning my mother refused to hear. They hadn't spoken since. I prayed she wouldn't hang up on me. When she answered, her voice thick with sleep, I just whispered, "Aunt Megan?" "It's Olivia." I ran away. There was a pause, and then her voice was clear as a bell, cutting through my fear. "Okay, honey, where are you?" "Stay exactly where you are. I'm getting in the car right now." She didn't ask why. She didn't lecture me. She just came. 4 hours later, as the sun began to rise over the Pennsylvania state line, her car pulled into the gas station parking lot. The moment she wrapped her arms around me, I knew I was finally safe. The escape was complete. The rebuilding was about to begin. Living with my Aunt Megan in Pittsburgh was like breathing clean air for the first time after years in a smoke-filled room. I finished high school, enrolled in community college for graphic design, and slowly, piece by piece, I began to put myself back together. By 21, I was ready to start my career. I built a small website, created a portfolio of new work from scratch, and started looking for freelance gigs. I was hopeful, hungry, and driven. But I underestimated the length of Vincent's shadow. I didn't know it yet, but my escape had only ended phase 1 of his war against me. The first few client inquiries I got fizzled out mysteriously. Then, a 1-star review appeared on my fledgling business profile. It was anonymous. It called me unprofessional and unreliable. A week later, another one appeared, using the word unstable. It was a cold, sickening echo of the words he used to whisper to my mother. I later found out through a family friend that Vincent, the respected community pillar, would casually poison the well against me. If he heard a local business was considering me for a small project, he'd say with feigned concern, "Olivia? A sweet kid, but she has some issues. I wouldn't want to see you get burned." He was actively, maliciously trying to ensure I would fail, to prove his narrative about me was right. He needed me to be the broken, troubled girl he'd created. It's one thing to fight your own battles, but it's another to discover someone is secretly rigging the game against you. Tell me something. Have you ever felt like someone was actively working to hold you back, even when you tried to move forward? If you've ever felt that invisible wall, just type the word overcome in the comments. Because that's what we do. It was then I realized that running away wasn't enough. To be truly free, I had to become untouchable. That realization lit a fire in me. For the next 14 years, I didn't just work. I waged a silent war against the failure he had wished upon me. I left Pennsylvania, moved to Austin, Texas, and poured every ounce of my being into my career. I worked harder, smarter, and longer than anyone. I built my agency, client by client, success by success, until I had forged a life and a reputation that Vincent's poison could never touch. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Aunt Megan. My mother, Helen, had stage 4 ovarian cancer. The doctors gave her 6 months. I flew back to Ohio that weekend. Walking into her hospital room was like stepping into a time machine. She was so small in the bed, a ghost of the woman I remembered. The years of silence between us melted away in the face of the sterile beeping of the machines. In the quiet of that room, the confession I had waited nearly 20 years to hear finally came. Through tears, she told me she knew. She had known the whole time that Vincent was cruel, that he was lying, that he was breaking me. She was just too weak, too afraid of being alone again, to stop him. She begged for my forgiveness. A week later, with a clarity she hadn't possessed in years, she had her lawyer come to the hospital. With a shaky hand, she signed a new will and a durable power of attorney, giving me immediate and total control over her finances, her property, and her entire estate. The power wasn't just a responsibility, it was a weapon, handed to me by the very person whose inaction had made it necessary. The board was set for the final game. My mother passed away peacefully 2 months later. Vincent played the part of the grieving widower beautifully. He was completely unaware that the moment my mother drew her last breath, the power she had given me was fully activated. He thought he was safe. He thought the house, my childhood home that he had so completely taken over, was his. That was his first mistake. My first order of business wasn't emotional, it was tactical. As the executor of the estate, I had access to every financial document from the last 20 years. I spent a week locked in my hotel room, not grieving, but auditing. With my professional background, it didn't take me long to find what I was looking for. Vincent, the man who preached discipline and responsibility, was a reckless financial disaster. He had taken out a massive home equity line of credit against my mother's house years ago and gambled it all away on terrible stock market bets. The house was drowning in debt held by a small, regional Ohio bank. This is where my revenge began, not with a shout, but with a quiet, legal maneuver. I used my own capital to form a new, completely anonymous LLC, something bland, like Columbus Property Solutions. Then, through my lawyers, that LLC made an offer to the regional bank to purchase their portfolio of distressed home loans, which included Vincent's bank's love to get bad debt off their books. They agreed immediately. Just like that, with the stroke of a pen and a wire transfer, I became his creditor. He was now sending his monthly mortgage payments to a P.O. box owned by me. He had no idea that the fate of his home now rested entirely in my hands. There's a different kind of power in moving silently, in setting the board while your opponent has no idea a game is even being played. If you believe that the smartest victory is the one your enemy never sees coming, do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that stories of strategic, quiet strength deserve to be heard. The financial vice was in place. Now, it was time to start tightening it. With the financial trap set and silently waiting, it was time to construct the stage. Financial ruin alone wasn't enough. He had built his entire identity on the foundation of public respect and community admiration. I needed to bulldoze that foundation in front of everyone. I needed an audience. So, I decided to create my own spectacle. I researched every local business award in the greater Columbus area and found the perfect one, the Chamber of Commerce's Entrepreneur of the Year. My agency was more than qualified, but I left nothing to chance. For 2 months, I orchestrated a subtle but powerful public relations campaign for myself within the local market, highlighting my company's successes and my Ohio roots. I made sure my story was not just compelling, but undeniable. I wasn't just nominated, I was practically curated to win. A narcissist's ego is their greatest vulnerability. I knew Vincent obsessively followed local news to see his name mentioned in the sports section for his coaching wins. He would see my nomination. The thought of being publicly recognized as the stepfather of such a local success story would be an irresistible drug to him. He would see it as his achievement. But I didn't just leave it to him to show up. I mailed a formal VIP invitation directly to the house. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock with embossed lettering. Inside, I included a short, handwritten note on my personal stationery. It read, "Vincent, it would mean the world to me if you were there to see this. I feel like so much of my drive came from the hard lessons I learned growing up in your house. All my best, Olivia." Every word was a carefully chosen piece of bait, laced with a poison he was too arrogant to taste. He was RSVPing to his own public execution, and I knew, with absolute certainty, he wouldn't dream of missing it. I let the applause die down, my hand resting on the podium to steady myself. I scanned the crowd and found his eyes. Vincent was practically glowing with pride, his chest puffed out. He was ready for his moment. I cleared my throat. Thank you so much to the Chamber of Commerce, to my incredible team, and to my clients. But tonight, I said, my voice clear and even, I want to dedicate this award to one person. The person who taught me more about motivation, survival, and the true nature of assets and liabilities than any business school ever could. My stepfather, Vincent. I paused and smiled directly at him. A ripple of confusion went through the room. You see, I continued, my voice never wavering. Vincent taught me my first hard lesson in business, that something you've spent years building can be erased in an instant. So I learned to build something indestructible. He taught me that your reputation can be attacked with lies from the shadows, so I learned to build one so solid that no lie could ever stick. But his most important lesson was about finance. He taught me that taking on reckless debt to project an image of success is a fool's game, a lesson he is about to learn in the most practical way imaginable. I lifted a folder from the podium that had been hidden from view. As of this morning, the LLC that I founded acquired the entirety of his outstanding mortgage debt. So, while I am grateful for this award, my real victory tonight is this. I held up the single sheet of paper from the folder. This is his official notice of foreclosure. The house is now mine. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room. Every head turned from me to him. His face, which had been beaming with pride just seconds before, had collapsed. It was a frozen mask of pure, unadulterated horror. The pillar of the community had just crumbled into dust in front of everyone. I walked off that stage and never looked back. The fallout for Vincent was immediate and total. The story was the only thing anyone in that town talked about for months. The school board launched an investigation, and he was fired, losing his job and his pension. The local sports league permanently barred him from coaching. Stripped of his reputation and his home, he became a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered about at the grocery store. His ruin was absolute. As for the house, my childhood home, I never spent another night in it. I had the entire property professionally cleared out and sold it within a month. It was never about the money or the property. It was about reclaiming the power. But victory can feel empty if it ends with you. True power lies in what you build from the ashes of your enemy's empire. I took every dollar from the sale of that house and established Olivia's Canvas, a foundation and scholarship fund dedicated to supporting young artists from low-income or unsupportive family environments. We provide grants for equipment, tuition for art school, and mentorship from professionals. We give them the support and validation I never had. I turned the very place that represented my oppression into a wellspring of opportunity for others. That is my real revenge. It's a living, breathing legacy of hope, funded by the demolition of a tyrant. This is the end of my story, but it might be the beginning of yours. These family revenge stories are more than just drama. They are testaments to survival. The world may never know the battles you've fought in silence, but we do here. If these stories speak your truth, and you believe in the power of rewriting your own ending, then subscribe and join a community that understands. Your story matters here.